Hey guys, welcome back to HotS Thoughts. It's been a while, but I decided to go ahead and make a video today. So I'm just gonna jump straight into it. The big winner from BlizzCon was Dehaka. I think it's pretty obvious. Like, out of all the heroes that we saw at BlizzCon, Dehaka was kind of the one that kind of jumped out from out of nowhere and seemed to do really, really well. A bit of a surprise that Zarya wasn't used more, but I found out that was partially due to Expulsion Zone being banned because it had some kind of weird interaction um, with Sanctification on Tyrael. So they just decided to ban out Expulsion Zone, and so Zarya wasn't really played as much as she probably should have been. But Dehaka was played quite a bit, and I think a lot of people were surprised watching that because they didn't expect to see that much Dehaka. So today I just want to address a Reddit topic that I saw and just kind of explain it through a video instead of writing a large essay on it, because I feel this way is a little bit easier. So let me show you the Reddit topic. This is the Reddit topic called Dehaka Better Than Credited. And basically it's going like, I saw him a lot at BlizzCon Championships and I tried him out and he's actually pretty good. What happened? Why don't more people play him? So the biggest deal here is a lot of people are citing, for instance, this is the first meta where Dehaka is relevant because he's a strong solo laner. Some people saying he's bad because he can't keep up with rotations. He doesn't have any engage. He doesn't have any peel for the team. These are the reasons why he's not like a main tank, or why he's not really used. Why people weren't expecting him to be used that often, but now he is. I think there was one more. I don't know. Anyways, so basically, I just want to talk about what makes him strong in this meta and why it's such a big deal. So I'm gonna be looking at this from the perspective of like at the top level or near the top level. So we're talking about from like, you know, top diamond to masters, grandmasters, pros. We're not talking about, you know, bronze to plat. These people who, like, to be honest, anything goes in those games. Like, you can draft pretty much anything and win. But we're talking about mainly for the upper half, the upper echelon of people who really have the game smoothed out and execution is really fluid. So the reason why Dehaka is very strong right now is the main drafting strategy right now in the metagame consists of two different things, right? You have a solo laner that ideally has some sort of global presence. So for this, we're typically looking for something like a Falstad or a Brightwing or Dehaka. These people who can instantly just move to the other side of the map and join the fight. And this is really particularly strong right now just because of the specialist changes that happened a couple months ago, where clearing waves is very, very important. Globals got a huge upgrade from that because it's really important, especially in the late game, to clear these gigantic waves and then jump back into the fight. You can't really take the time to spend, you know, 30 seconds or whatever for a Jaina to mount up, walk to the lane, clear it, and then walk back. That's just too much time. It's way easier if you can have a Falstad who just walks over there, kills the wave real quick, and then flies back. Much, much easier. And it also allows you to counter push waves back into your opponent, so that if they don't have a global, then they have to deal with the waves constantly pushing against them. It also allows you a lot more experience in the early mid game, where you can kind of soak and then jump up to, you know, tributes or temples or whatever. So that's one of the big reasons why globals got a big buff. The other one is because of maps. We had some new maps introduced, the StarCraft maps, Praxis Holdout and Warhead Junction. Praxis Holdout is a lot like Dragonshire in the sense that it's like hold 2 points at the same time. And since they're on opposite sides of the map, it's really easy as a global hero to just kind of jump over and tip the scales really quickly. So if you have a solo 1 versus 1 lane and a 4-man on the other side, you can, and you take really strong control. Like, you get a kill on bottom, you take really strong control of that shrine or that point, then you can suddenly jump up to the top and tip the scales in the 1v1, change it to a 2v1 fight, and win that really quickly. And then you charge up the beacon really quickly, and you get the Zerg wave. So that's the main power on that map. On Warhead Junction, it's just a gigantic map, so split pushers are necessarily amazing because they can just constantly push the waves in, and if you don't have any sort of global presence to like de-push the wave and then jump back to the team fight where it's happening over a warhead or whatever, then you're at a severe disadvantage. So those two maps, as well as the specialist patch, I think are a large reason why globals are really big right now, and it's the reason why Dehaka got kind of a ghost buff. Now, the thing that makes him such a good solo laner right now is that a lot of the previous gods of the solo lane have kind of been pushed out of the meta. So if you remember back in like spring season, that was kind of the era of Zagara Thrall. That's where we had basically every single solo matchup was Zagara Thrall, because Zagara could just kind of poke you with a Hydralisk and late creep and just kind of constantly push the lane. And the only person who was able to deal with that was Thrall, because he could just continually sustain through it and threaten Zagara and kill her if necessary. And we went through a couple of different iterations of this. Before that, if you remember, like throughout most of 2015, it was like a tank solo lane, like you just send your tanks up there. And that was back when 1-1-3 was more popular. You'd have like tanks there, and then like people in mid lane who would push and then like occasionally go down to the tri lane. But that was basically tanks, and that kind of evolved into like the Sonya Leoric thing back when Leoric was OP. And since then, it just kind of evolved more towards a sustained pushing lane. And since then, we've seen a lot of nerfs towards Zagara. We've seen a lot of nerfs towards Thrall, and just in general a lot of buffs to other characters that counter these sort of tanky damage over time type of heroes. So in particular, Thrall and Sonya fell way down on the priority list. Zagara is no longer as strong at team fighting, and she fell way down on the priority list, except for in certain situations where that split push is necessary. But she's just not as strong of a solo laner as she used to be. So the newer generation of solo laners that have come in have been the revamped Shen, who can kind of tank everything and be really, really obnoxious. Then you have Alarak, who has sustain on his lightning and can be brutal versus a lot of the other solo laners. You also have you have Dehaka, of course. Leoric has kind of floated back into the meta as a solo laner. He's actually pretty decent at just kind of sustaining in lane with the Drain Hope forever, and he has decent-ish wave clear. So against the right hero, he can actually do pretty nicely. And the other big one is Rexxar. Rexxar is a lane bully, especially on Braxis Holdout, where he's very popular right now. So this newer generation of solo laners is less about being able to constantly push the lane or sustain through things or like deal big damage or anything like that. Like it's mostly about just being able to outlast your opponent and soak up tower shots at the expense of mostly your wave clear and your ability to like the kill pressure. There's not as much kill pressure up there as there used to be. So what you see now is mainly just a lot of stagnation in the solo lane, where you'll have say an Alarak versus a Chen, and the Chen can't really go in because he'll get pretty hurt, and the Alarak can't really go in because it's very easy to get countered by the Chen if you miss your Discord strike. So it's stuff like that where you see kind of a stale thing. The thing that pushes Dehaka towards the front is Dehaka has probably the best wave clear out of all the solo laners right now. You can kind of just walk in and clear the lane, and it's very difficult to actually do anything about it as any of the other solo laners because he has so much sustain and he can return so much damage with drag. So, say you're against an Alarak or whatever and he does his combo on you, you can immediately just drag him and return all of that damage back. And he's also got the innate sustain of his trait if he needs to. He can also be and burrow back to lane if time permits. So there's also that. He's very strong in lane. He has seemingly unlimited sustain as well as amazing wave clear. That's a big reason why we're seeing him kind of resurge in the meta, and in particular in the solo lane. Now, the reason why he's not a solo tank is largely due to the fact that he is kind of sequestered to the solo lane. He can't really join... let me back up just a bit. So, in top play, in professional and like Grandmasters play, there is a lot of 1-4 splits. Back in the day, we used to do a lot of 1-1-3, where you would have like 2 solo lanes and then like a 3 versus 3 trying to push as hard as possible at the other. We would have like a 2-1-2, which is a very defensive setup. But over time, we've kind of evolved to do this 1-4 split on most maps that permit it. The only ones that don't permit it are very large maps, like say Sky Temple or Warhead Junction. Or Cursed Hollow is debatable. You can still kind of do a 4-1 there. But those maps kind of prevent you from really doing the 4-1 because you can't reliably rotate between mid and bot or mid and top and still soak all the XP. But on all the smaller maps like Tomb of the Spider Queen, like Dragonshire, things like that, and the 2-lane maps like Battlefield of Eternity, Braxis Holdout, 4-1 is pretty much the way to go. So you have this kind of 4-1 split that's happening, and Dehaka's pretty much always in the solo lane because the whole purpose of the 4-man rotations is to be able to out-rotate your opponent and continually clear the waves and push them and get ganks if the other team isn't really paying attention or rotates poorly. So it's all very momentum based. You're basically trying to quickly go between the waves, clear the waves, go to the next lane, clear the wave, go to the next lane, clear the wave, and if there's ever an opening to gank a hero, you want to be able to instantly engage on top of them and kill them. And for this, Dehaka is not ideal. Problem with that is he can't mount up, so he tends to fall behind in these rotations. He doesn't move as quickly as some of the mounting characters, and he doesn't have any sort of hard engage aside from drag, which is really easy to dodge. So it's very difficult for him to get reliable, strong engage on people who are out of position. And especially, once again, because he has to walk up to them. He can't mount up, he has to actually like walk up to them, which is not as reliable. So that's the main reason why he's not in the 4-man. He's pretty much always in this top lane. And for a solo tank, that's not very good. You don't typically want to have your solo tank in the top lane, especially in the current meta, where the importance of tanky bruisers has kind of been brought down. You can't have heroes like Thrall, Sonya, or even Kerrigan like in your 4-man rotation typically, because they're just not very strong without a tank. You don't really have much of a front line. And if you're facing another team that does have a front line with the 4-man, you're much more likely to get engaged upon and lose that fight. So the biggest problem there is just that with a solo tank Alarak, you're going to lose the 4-man rotations. Like, that's just a given. and whether or not you put him in the solo lane or in the 4-man rotations, like, you're going to lose the rotations. You won't do as well as another team that is has properly drafted for the map and is doing the rotations correctly. And I say it like that because I know there's always that kind of contradiction where you say, but no, but I've played it before and my team won because the other team, like, they just couldn't keep up with their rotations because they were bad. And I don't like to, when I talk about theory crafting and talk about how things work in the meta, I don't like to take these kind of outlier occasions where you have people who just don't know how to play very well or don't know how to match these rotations well. I don't like to use that as an example because that's not an example of what pristine organized play would look like. That's not, it's more realistic maybe, but it's not a good example of what the composition has the potential to do. And that's really the most important thing when we look at how things work in the game, is we want to look at the potential for what they can do and try to play them to their best potential rather than playing them for whatever works, which when you're playing against opponents that make a lot of mistakes, that margin for error is very, very wide. So basically, if I want to put this in summation for Dehaka, the reason why we saw him a lot at BlizzCon was because there have been a lot of metagame changes that have pushed Dehaka towards the forefront as a top solo laner with global pressure, which is very, very important in the metagame right now. And the reason why he's not typically used as a solo tank is not necessarily because of bad engagement or because he's not tanky enough or whatever, which admittedly he does have the lowest health out of any of the tanks except for Zarya, but Zarya has like an OP shield. The reason why he's not played as a solo tank is not because of those reasons, it's because he's kind of shoehorned into this role as a solo laner. If he tries to solo tank, your team necessarily loses the 4-man rotation, and during the late game he can't get that extra bonus that he gets from his trait and brush stock. He can't really use those to their full capability because he has to stay somewhat with the team so that they can engage and get anything done. He can't mercilessly split push like he would in a double tank composition. So these are the main problems that kind of, I don't want to say they're problems, but these are the main reasons why Dehaka has kind of wormed his way into the meta and why he is the way that he is. If we ever were to see him as a solo tank, I think it would have to be a huge shift in his base stats away from his talents and his trait, because I don't think that you can reliably play Dehaka as a full tank if you're not getting the necessary value that you need from your trait and from that split pushing, which he's so strong with. And that's okay with me. I really don't think that Dehaka should be a full solo tank. I don't think that's necessary. I do believe that we need some more, of course, but I think he has a wonderful little niche right now, and he's doing a great job in the meta, and I'm really happy that we got to see him at BlizzCon. So that's pretty much it. If you have any ideas, concerns, anything you disagree with, let me know down below in the comments. I want to try to start doing these videos more often. It's difficult for me because I'm not a public speaker. Typically, I don't like to put myself on camera, but I'm trying to do it more often. I'm trying to get this stuff out there for you guys, and I hope you enjoy. So I'll see you guys next time on the next HotS Thoughts. Later.